Jonathan Mercer was tired of his usual life. The endless meetings, the flashing cameras, constant calls from people who wanted something from him, it all felt suffocating. Even though he had everything anyone could dream of, something inside him felt empty. He wanted a break, a place where no one knew who he was, where he could just be himself without the weight of expectations. He decided to leave the city behind and spend a week in a small seaside town, a place he had heard about from a friend. He wanted simplicity, calm, maybe a chance to see the world through different eyes. He rented a small cottage near the beach. It was nothing fancy, just enough to sleep, cook, and enjoy the view. No chandeliers, no marble floors, no expensive gadgets, just a simple home that felt real. He packed lightly, wearing clothes that blended in with the crowd, and left his expensive watches and jewelry behind. Jonathan wanted to be invisible, unnoticed, a normal person for a change. As he arrived in town, he felt a strange mix of relief and nervous excitement. He was a stranger here, and that was exactly what he wanted. The town was quiet and charming. Narrow streets wound between small houses with bright flowers on the windowsills. The smell of the ocean mixed with fresh bread from the bakery down the street. Children ran freely along the paths, and shopkeepers greeted each other warmly. Everything felt slow, like the town moved at a rhythm different from the city, and Jonathan found it strangely comforting. He walked slowly, taking in the sights, pretending to be just another tourist who had wandered in by chance at the local hotel where he would stay. The staff were friendly, but had no idea who he really was. One of the maids, Clara, moved quickly and efficiently, her uniform simple but tidy. She smiled at everyone, but her eyes carried a certain seriousness that spoke of responsibility and determination. Jonathan noticed her right away, though he made no attempt to draw attention. There was something about the way she worked, focused, kind, quietly confident, that intrigued him. He reminded himself not to get distracted, but he couldn't help feeling curious about the people who lived real lives here. So different from the artificial world he usually inhabited, Jonathan spent his first day exploring the town. He wandered through small shops filled with handmade items, talked to a few locals about life by the sea, even tried the fresh pastries from the bakery. Each interaction was a reminder of the life he had never known, the life that didn't revolve around wealth or status. He felt a strange mix of freedom and peace. For the first time in years, he could just be a person, not a CEO, not a billionaire, not a public figure. He could walk without cameras following him, smile without suspicion, and sit quietly without people wanting to impress him. In the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonathan walked along the beach. The waves were gentle, and the sand felt soft beneath his feet. He watched children building sandcastles, couples holding hands, and older people sitting on benches watching the tide. The scene was simple but full of life, a reminder that happiness didn't need to be complicated. Jonathan felt a lightness in his chest, a rare moment of contentment. He realized he had been searching for this feeling for a long time, just being present, just feeling the world around him without distractions or demands. Back at the hotel, Clara continued her work. She moved from room to room, making beds, cleaning floors, and ensuring everything was in order. She had learned long ago that her efforts made a difference, even if nobody noticed. She didn't need recognition. She found satisfaction in doing her job well and helping others. When she passed Jonathan's room, she greeted him politely, noticing only a new guest and nothing unusual. Jonathan appreciated the normality of the interaction. He didn't want special treatment. He wanted authenticity. Clara gave that without even knowing it. Over the next few days, Jonathan settled into a quiet routine. He walked along the cliffs, sat in small cafes watching the waves, and spoke to locals about their lives. He learned about the struggles and joys of the people around him, the simple kindnesses they offered each other, and the resilience that came from facing life's challenges head-on. It was humbling and inspiring. He realized that despite all his wealth, he had missed the beauty in small, everyday moments. He had taken them for granted in his fast-paced life, but here they felt like treasures. He also began to notice Clara more. Not in a romantic way, but as someone whose dedication and strength left an impression on him. She moved through her tasks with purpose, never complaining, always helping others when needed. One morning, he saw her helping an elderly guest carry groceries up the stairs, her patience and care evident in every movement. Jonathan felt a deep respect for her, though he kept his distance, not wanting to interfere in her life or make her feel uncomfortable. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the sea. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the wind picked up, rattling windows and sending leaves flying. Jonathan stood by the window of his cottage, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The storm was intense but beautiful, a reminder of nature's power. He felt both awed and slightly fearful, realizing how small and vulnerable he truly was. It was a feeling he rarely experienced in his controlled, high-powered life, and he found it strangely refreshing. As the storm raged outside, Jonathan thought about why he had come here. He hadn't just wanted a vacation. He had wanted perspective. He had wanted to see life without filters, without pretenses, and without people constantly reacting to who he was. This town, these people, and even the quiet work of Clara reminded him of what mattered: courage, kindness, and honesty. Things money couldn't buy. By the end of the first week, Jonathan felt a connection to the town he hadn't expected. He was still a stranger, still unknown, but he felt like he belonged in a way that surprised him. The simplicity of life here, the human moments, and the resilience of people like Clara gave him a sense of clarity. For the first time in years, he felt grounded, ready to see the world through eyes not clouded by wealth, expectations, or obligations. He realized that his journey had only just begun, and that the real lessons were waiting for him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The storm had passed, leaving the town quiet and damp, with puddles reflecting the soft morning sunlight. Jonathan woke early, as he often did, to the sound of birds and the faint scent of salt from the sea. Despite the calm, a part of him still felt restless. Walking along the beach, he noticed the waves were rougher than usual, and the tide had crept up closer to the cliffs. He liked the sound of the ocean. It was honest and alive, not controlled or filtered, like the world he had left behind. Today, he wanted to explore the cliffs that overlooked the water, a path he had often seen but never dared to follow. He felt drawn to it, a quiet pull he could not ignore. The climb was steeper than it appeared from below, and Jonathan moved cautiously. Loose rocks crunched under his shoes, and the wind tugged at his coat, reminding him that nature could be unpredictable. He walked slowly, focusing on each step, letting the tension of his city life fall away with every careful movement. The town had given him peace, but the cliffs offered a sense of challenge, a way to feel fully alive. As though the danger itself reminded him that he existed beyond wealth and comfort. As he reached a narrow ledge, Jonathan paused to admire the view. The ocean stretched endlessly, waves colliding with rocks in a rhythm that seemed both violent and beautiful. He felt exhilaration and fear all at once, a sensation he had rarely allowed himself to feel. Without thinking, he stepped closer to the edge to get a better look at the water below. The rocks beneath him were slick from the storm, and in a sudden, terrifying moment, his foot slipped. He lost balance and tumbled toward the edge. Instinct and adrenaline took over, but before he could regain control, he fell, landing hard on the jagged rocks. Pain shot through his leg, and the cold spray of water hit his face as he struggled to hold on. Waves crashed around him, pulling at his clothes, making it impossible to climb back up without help. Panic rose, but Jonathan tried to stay calm. He called out, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of the ocean. Every second felt endless, the water threatening to sweep him away. His thoughts raced. He was not strong, not trained for this kind of danger. The fear was sharp and immediate, a reminder that no amount of money could protect him in this moment. As he tried to find a stable foothold, he realized he might not make it on his own. The situation was serious, and for the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt completely powerless. Meanwhile, Clara was finishing her morning rounds at the hotel. She had been tidying rooms, making beds, and arranging fresh towels when she noticed a commotion outside. Her eyes caught sight of a figure near the cliffs, waving frantically. Something about the movement felt wrong, urgent. Without hesitation, She grabbed her coat and ran toward the sound. Moving faster than she had ever moved before in her day-to-day routine, she had always been responsible and careful, but she also had courage she rarely needed to summon. Today, that courage was necessary. When she reached the edge of the cliffs, she saw Jonathan struggling against the waves, his coat soaked and his strength fading. Clara's heart pounded, but she stayed focused. She scanned the area, looking for anything that could help: branches, rocks, anything sturdy to reach him with. She found a thick branch and held it out, calling for him to grab on. Jonathan, his arms shaking from cold and fear, reached for it. Clara braced herself, pulling with all her might, using her weight and strength to keep him steady. It was exhausting, and the waves crashed harder, but she refused to let go. Every pull was a test of determination. A battle of will between her and the sea, after what felt like hours but was only minutes. Jonathan managed to scramble onto the rocks near Clara. He collapsed, shivering and exhausted, trying to catch his breath. Clara stayed close, making sure he was safe before allowing herself a moment to breathe. She assessed his condition quickly, noticing his limp and the bruises forming from the fall. Though the adrenaline was fading, her mind stayed sharp. She guided him away from the edge, helping him to a safer area where the ground was stable. Jonathan looked at her with disbelief and gratitude. He wanted to thank her properly, but words failed him. He had experienced many things in his life, but nothing quite like this. A stranger, someone with no obligation to help, had risked herself to save him. It humbled him in a way he had never anticipated. Clara, still focused and steady, simply said, "You should be more careful. The cliffs are dangerous." Her tone was firm but kind, without condescension. Jonathan realized that her concern was genuine, rooted in care for another human being rather than fear or expectation of reward. Once he regained some strength, Clara helped him to a nearby bench where he could sit and rest. She offered him water and kept a steady presence, not hovering but staying attentive. Jonathan was amazed by her composure. She was ordinary in appearance, but her actions were extraordinary. He had expected panic, hesitation, or even indifference, but Clara had acted decisively and selflessly. He felt a deep respect for her, realizing that bravery did not come from titles or wealth, it came from character. Jonathan tried to explain his gratitude, but Clara waved him off. She said she was just doing what anyone should do, and her focus returned to making sure he could walk without collapsing. Jonathan marveled at her humility. In his world, people often performed acts of kindness for recognition or reward, but Clara's courage was genuine. He found himself wanting to know more about her, not in a selfish way, but because he wanted to understand what gave her such strength. Over the next few hours, Jonathan slowly regained mobility with Clara's support. She led him back to the hotel, checking on him as they walked. The townspeople they passed offered smiles and friendly greetings, unaware of the dramatic events that had just unfolded. Jonathan felt a strange comfort in the normalcy around him. Despite the danger, life continued, and Clara's calm presence reminded him that human connection could make even frightening experiences manageable. Once inside the hotel, Clara helped him settle into his room, making sure he was warm, dry, and safe. She fetched blankets, checked the first aid kit, and gently encouraged him to rest. Jonathan, still in awe of her courage, realized he had no way of truly repaying her. He offered words of thanks, but they seemed insufficient. Clara simply smiled, saying it was all part of her job. Jonathan knew it was more than that. She had acted out of kindness and bravery, not obligation. It left him speechless and thoughtful. That evening, as Jonathan lay in his bed reflecting on the day, he felt a mixture of emotions. Fear, relief, gratitude, and admiration all intertwined. He thought about how unpredictable life could be and how fragile human existence was. Clara had reminded him of the importance of courage, humility, and selflessness, qualities he had often overlooked in his pursuit of success and wealth. Her actions had changed his perspective, showing him that real heroes did not wear capes or hold titles. They acted when it mattered most, quietly and without expectation. Jonathan also realized that his desire to experience life as a regular person had led him to this moment. If he had stayed in his comfortable, controlled environment, He would never have met Clara or witnessed such genuine courage. The experience made him reflect on the importance of stepping out of one's comfort zone and engaging with the world directly, not through the lens of wealth or status. Human connection, he realized, was far more valuable than anything money could buy. By the next morning, Jonathan had recovered enough to move without assistance, though the memory of the fall remained vivid. He sought out Clara to thank her again, this time more sincerely, understanding that no words could fully capture his gratitude. She accepted his thanks with her usual modesty, emphasizing that what mattered most was that he was safe. Jonathan knew he would remember this day forever. A humble maid risked her life to save a stranger and left an indelible mark on him. The events of the cliff and the storm became a quiet turning point for Jonathan. He began to observe Clara not just as a hotel staff member, but as someone whose character and courage were remarkable. He watched her interact with others, always patient, always considerate, always moving with purpose. He understood that her life was far from easy, yet she carried herself with a resilience and strength that inspired him. Jonathan realized that heroism was not about fame or recognition. It was about action, heart, and the willingness to face danger for the sake of others. In the days that followed, Jonathan's respect and admiration for Clara deepened. He found himself reflecting on her bravery and thinking about how rare it was to encounter someone so genuinely selfless. Each moment he spent in the town reinforced the lessons he had begun to learn, that life was fragile, that courage could be quiet yet profound, and that human connection was the most meaningful treasure one could have. He felt a sense of humility that had been missing from his life, an awareness that even someone with all the wealth in the world could learn from those who lived ordinary lives with extraordinary courage. After the cliff incident, Jonathan found himself thinking about Clara constantly. Her bravery had left a mark on him that he could not ignore. He realized that the maid who had saved his life was not just an ordinary person. She carried a quiet strength and resilience that made him question everything he had taken for granted in his own world. Jonathan had always been surrounded by people who wanted something from him: money, influence, or recognition, but Clara acted purely out of care. That thought alone humbled him. Over the next few days, Jonathan began to observe Clara more closely, always careful to remain discreet. He noticed how she treated every guest with kindness, regardless of their mood or behavior. She greeted the elderly man in room 12 with a warm smile and helped him carry his heavy luggage. She comforted a small child who was missing his parents, distracting him with simple games and laughter. She never seemed to rush, never seemed impatient, even when the hotel was busy and noisy. Jonathan watched from a distance, trying to understand what motivated her. What gave her such patience and courage? He decided to learn more about her life. Not to intrude, but because he felt compelled to understand her world. One afternoon, he asked to help her with some of the hotel chores. Clara was surprised, but she agreed when she realized he genuinely wanted to participate, not just observe. Together, they cleaned floors, arranged towels, and helped with minor repairs. Jonathan discovered that even simple tasks could teach humility and patience. He realized that Clara found pride and satisfaction in her work, not because it was glamorous, but because it was meaningful and necessary as they worked. Jonathan tried to strike up conversations, learning small details about her life. He found out that she had grown up in this town, that her family had faced financial struggles, and that she had taken responsibility for helping them from a young age. Clara spoke with honesty and humility, never complaining, never exaggerating, just telling her story as it was. Jonathan felt an admiration that went beyond gratitude. He felt respect. Her life was not easy, yet she faced it with courage and kindness. He realized that the qualities he had always valued in business strength, decisiveness, intelligence, were present in a different form in Clara, in her courage, patience, and moral integrity. One evening, after a long day of work at the hotel, Jonathan invited Clara to take a walk along the quieter streets of the town. She hesitated at first, thinking he might have other motives, but he assured her that he simply enjoyed her company and the calm of the evening. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange, the air cool and fresh. They walked slowly, talking about the town, the people, and the small joys that made life meaningful. Jonathan listened more than he spoke, realizing that he had spent most of his life talking without truly listening. During the walk, Jonathan shared some of his own experiences, though carefully avoiding details that would reveal his true identity. He spoke about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Clara listened quietly, occasionally asking questions that reflected her curiosity and wisdom. Jonathan was struck by how she could find interest and value in simple stories, seeing meaning where he had long grown numb. Her perspective reminded him that life was not just about achievements or recognition. It was about connection, empathy, and understanding. As days passed, Jonathan noticed a subtle change in himself. He felt more present, more aware of the small details around him. He started to appreciate the smell of fresh bread in the bakery, the laughter of children playing, and the warmth of a friendly greeting. Clara had unknowingly taught him a valuable lesson: to notice life in its smallest moments and to cherish the people who made it meaningful. Jonathan felt a sense of peace he had never experienced before, a calm that money could never buy. He also began to see Clara's dedication in a deeper light. It wasn't just her job that motivated her. It was a sense of responsibility, a commitment to helping others, and making the world around her better. She acted with integrity and care in everything she did, from helping guests to supporting her family. Jonathan realized that her courage on the cliffs was not an isolated incident. It was a reflection of her character, honed over years of facing challenges and putting others before herself. He admired her strength, not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it was consistent and sincere. One afternoon, Jonathan asked Clara if she would like to visit the local market with him. She agreed, intrigued by his invitation and the chance to see the market through someone else's eyes. As they walked through the stalls, they saw vendors selling fresh fruits, vegetables, and handmade goods. Children ran past, laughing, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. Jonathan noticed how Clara engaged with the vendors, asking about their day, sharing a joke, and offering help when needed. He realized that her kindness extended beyond the hotel, into the entire community. She was a person who quietly made the world around her better. One small act at a time. Jonathan wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way. He had offered words before, but they felt inadequate. He thought about giving her a gift, but he wanted it to be something personal, something that reflected her life and values rather than wealth or status. After some consideration, he decided to help her with a long-term goal she had mentioned casually, the desire to improve her home and support her family. He wanted to do it in a way that respected her independence and dignity. Not as charity, but as support for someone who had shown extraordinary courage and integrity. One evening, Jonathan invited Clara to sit and talk while the sunset painted the sky. He shared his reflections on the events that had brought them together, acknowledging her heroism and the lessons he had learned from her. Clara listened, humbled but pleased that he valued her not for who she could serve or what she could do for him, but for her character, courage, and heart. Jonathan felt a connection that went beyond words, a quiet understanding between two people who had seen the best in each other during extraordinary circumstances. The week passed quickly. Jonathan knew he would soon return to his life, a world filled with responsibilities, pressures, and expectations. But he also knew that he would carry the lessons he had learned here forever. Clara had shown him the value of humility, courage, and compassion. She had reminded him that true strength came from character, not wealth, and that the most meaningful moments in life often came from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. On his last day in the town, Jonathan found a quiet moment to speak to Clara alone. He thanked her again, not just for saving his life, but for changing the way he saw the world. Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting both humility and pride. She said she had only done what anyone would do, but Jonathan knew it was far more than that. Her courage and kindness had left a lasting impact, and he was determined to honor that in his own way, quietly and respectfully, as he packed his things. Jonathan looked around the small cottage, the streets of the town, and the familiar faces he had come to know. He felt gratitude, not just for the beauty of the town, but for the people who had taught him lessons no money could buy. Clara had shown him that heroism, bravery, and compassion existed in everyday acts, and that these qualities were far more valuable than wealth or status. Jonathan left the town with a heart that felt lighter, a mind that was clearer, and a renewed appreciation for life and human connection. Even after he returned to his busy, demanding world, Jonathan often thought about Clara. He remembered the strength in her eyes, the steadiness of her hands, and the warmth of her smile. Her actions had left an imprint on his life, teaching him lessons about courage, humility, and the power of kindness. He realized that no amount of money could replace the value of human connection and the quiet heroism of ordinary people. Make the world a better place through simple, selfless acts. Jonathan knew that someday he would find a way to express his gratitude in a lasting, meaningful way. But for now, he was content to carry the memory of Clara with him, letting it influence the way he lived, the way he interacted with others, and the way he valued the simple, profound moments that make life truly extraordinary. Jonathan had returned to his city life, but something about the quiet town and Clara remained with him. He found himself replaying the moments they had shared, the way she had acted without fear or hesitation, the simplicity and honesty of her kindness. He realized that her actions had not only saved his life, but it also changed the way he viewed the world. His days were still filled with meetings, calls, and the constant pressure of his wealth and reputation. But he carried with him a quiet reminder of what really mattered. He thought about Clara constantly. Not just her bravery, but the way she treated every person she met with respect and empathy. He remembered how she had interacted with the townspeople, always calm, always present. She had shown him that courage was not about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about being there for others, quietly, sincerely, and consistently. Jonathan knew that he had witnessed true heroism, and it humbled him. It made him question the values he had lived by for so many years. After some reflection, Jonathan decided he wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way. Words alone could never capture what he felt. He wanted to do something that would honor Clara's courage and the life she had lived with dignity, responsibility, and kindness. He thought about how he could help her without undermining her independence, something that would improve her life while respecting her choices. After careful planning, he decided to start by supporting her education and helping her family with practical needs. Things she had always handled on her own, but that had limited her. Opportunities. Jonathan reached out anonymously to the town's post office and local contacts, arranging for funds to be set aside for Clara's education and her family's home repairs. He made sure everything was done in a way that preserved her dignity so she could accept the help without feeling indebted. At the same time, he began supporting the hotel with upgrades, new equipment, and improvements to make the work easier for Clara and her colleagues. He did it quietly, not seeking attention or praise, but simply to make a positive difference in her life. Meanwhile, Clara continued with her daily life, unaware of the changes happening around her. She continued her work with the same dedication, helping guests, caring for her family, and maintaining the hotel. She found joy in the simple accomplishments of each day, ever realizing that someone she had saved had begun to shape a better future for her. Clara's strength and humility were remarkable. She did not need recognition or reward. She acted because it was right, because she cared, and because she believed in the value of human connection. Jonathan followed the progress quietly, feeling a sense of satisfaction unlike anything he had experienced in his previous life. He knew he could never repay Clara fully for the courage she had shown, but he wanted her life to reflect the significance of her actions. He also wanted to honor the lessons she had taught him: humility, empathy, patience, and the true meaning of courage. In doing so, he felt closer to understanding the world beyond wealth, status, and superficial success. On a bright morning, Jonathan returned to the town, this time without any disguise. He wanted to see the results of the efforts he had arranged, to witness the positive changes in Clara's life, and to reconnect in person, not as a stranger, but as someone who genuinely cared. The town welcomed him with warmth, but he sought out Clara first. He found her working in the hotel lobby, moving swiftly and efficiently, helping guests with her usual calm and focus. Seeing her there, Jonathan was reminded of the quiet strength she carried every day, a strength that had impacted him more than he could put into words. Clara was surprised to see him, and there was a moment of hesitation. She did not expect him to return, and she had no idea of the changes that had already been set in motion. Jonathan greeted her warmly, and she responded with her natural politeness, still unaware of the efforts he had made to improve her life. They spoke about ordinary things at first, but Jonathan's presence carried a weight of meaning. Clara noticed a difference in him, a sincerity that she had not seen before. He seemed grounded, more attentive, and appreciative of the small moments they shared. Jonathan led Clara outside to a quiet spot near the hotel, where the sun filtered through the trees, creating patterns on the ground. He wanted to talk to her in a calm, uninterrupted space, away from the routines and responsibilities of the hotel. He began to speak, explaining his gratitude in a way that was honest and heartfelt. He told her how her courage on the cliffs had changed his life, how her humility and kindness had opened his eyes to a different way of living. Clara listened quietly, her eyes reflecting surprise and humility. She had never thought of herself as someone extraordinary. Yet her actions had truly been remarkable. He told Clara about the support he had arranged her education, improvements for her family, and enhancements for the hotel. Clara was stunned, her mind racing to comprehend the thoughtfulness behind the gestures. She had never expected such attention or generosity. And yet Jonathan explained that it was not meant as charity, but as recognition of her courage and the values she embodied. He wanted her to see that her life, her actions, and her dedication mattered deeply, and that they had inspired someone in a way she could never have imagined. Clara's initial shock gradually gave way to gratitude, but she remained humble, insisting that she had only done what anyone would do in her place. Jonathan shook his head, insisting that her bravery went far beyond ordinary expectations. He emphasized that heroism could take many forms and that her quiet courage, her integrity, and her consistent kindness were as extraordinary as any public act of heroism. Clara listened. Realizing that someone saw her life in a way she had never seen herself, Jonathan and Clara spent the day together. Walking through the town and observing the subtle changes that had taken place, Jonathan pointed out the new equipment at the hotel, improvements that made work easier and more efficient. He shared how her family had benefited quietly from the support arranged, enhancing their home and easing daily challenges. Clara felt a mix of humility, surprise, and gratitude, but she never lost her natural composure. She understood that these changes were meant to empower her, not to create dependency, and she appreciated the thoughtfulness behind every gesture as the day went on. Jonathan reflected on how much he had learned from Clara, her courage, humility, and care had not only saved his life, but it also taught him the value of small, consistent acts of goodness. He realized that wealth alone could not create meaning, but that human connection, empathy, and selfless action could change lives profoundly. Clara had reminded him of the essence of life, to care for others, to act with integrity, and to recognize the importance of ordinary moments filled with extraordinary kindness. By the evening, Jonathan felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never experienced before. He knew that he could continue to help in ways that respected Clara's independence and dignity. But the true reward was witnessing her strength and resilience firsthand. He had hoped to express gratitude, but he also found himself deeply inspired by her. Understanding that life's most meaningful lessons often came from those who live quietly with courage and integrity. Clara, too, began to see Jonathan in a new light. She recognized that he had been transformed by her actions, and that his interest in supporting her was rooted in genuine respect rather than obligation. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her bravery had not gone unnoticed, and that it had inspired someone who had the means to create lasting change. Yet she remained humble, understanding that true courage was not about recognition, but about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. The connection between Jonathan and Clara deepened as they spent time together, sharing stories, observing the town, and reflecting on the lessons of life. Jonathan found that he could speak openly, without pretense, and Clara felt that her perspective and experiences were valued. They laughed, shared quiet moments of reflection, and observed the world around them with a renewed sense of appreciation. Jonathan realized that the bond they had formed was built on respect, gratitude, and mutual understanding rather than expectation or reward. As the day ended, Jonathan and Clara sat quietly by the water, watching the sunset. Jonathan spoke softly, expressing his hope that Clara would continue to pursue her dreams, knowing that she had already made a lasting impact on someone else's life. Clara listened, understanding that her actions had not only saved a life, but had also transformed it. She realized that courage, humility, and kindness had a power beyond measure, capable of touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. Jonathan left the town with a heart full of gratitude, a renewed sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to live a meaningful life. Clara had taught him lessons that money could never buy, lessons about bravery, humility, and the quiet power of selfless action. He knew that he would carry these lessons with him always, letting them shape his decisions, his interactions, and the way he viewed the world. For Clara, the experience had been humbling and transformative in its own way. She had never sought recognition, but she came to understand that her courage and integrity had made a difference beyond her imagination. She continued her daily life with the same dedication and care, but now with a quiet awareness that her actions had inspired someone to act with compassion and thoughtfulness. The bond between them remained unspoken but deeply felt, a connection built on respect, gratitude, and shared humanity. Jonathan returned to his city life with a quiet resolve. The bustling streets, the constant phone calls, and the unending meetings were all familiar, but his perspective had shifted. The events in the small town and the encounter with Clara had left a deep impression on him. He realized that life was about more than success, wealth, and influence. It was about people, connections, and the quiet acts of courage that often go unnoticed but change lives in profound ways. He often reflected on Clara's bravery and humility. She had risked her own safety without hesitation, acted purely out of care for another human being, and never sought recognition. Jonathan thought about how rare it was to encounter someone so selfless and strong. Her actions had not only saved his life, but it also reminded him of the values he had overlooked for so long: empathy, integrity, and courage. In the chaos of his usual life, he carried the memory of her strength as a guiding principle. Jonathan decided that his gratitude should take a tangible form, but one that respected Clara's dignity. He arranged for her education to be fully funded, ensuring she could pursue dreams she had set aside to support her family. Her home was quietly improved, providing comfort and stability, and the hotel received upgrades to make her daily work easier. All of these efforts were done with discretion, so Clara could accept them without feeling patronized. Jonathan wanted her to feel empowered, not indebted. He also wanted to continue learning from her example. He began to focus more on the people around him in his city life, noticing their struggles, their small victories, and their acts of kindness. Clara had shown him that heroism was not always grand or public. It was often quiet, consistent, and rooted in compassion. Jonathan tried to apply these lessons in his interactions, whether it was listening more carefully to colleagues, helping a neighbor, or showing appreciation for small efforts. Each action reminded him of the woman who had changed the way he understood life. Months passed, and Jonathan maintained a quiet connection to the town and to Clara. He occasionally sent messages to check on her, always careful not to intrude, always encouraging. He learned about her progress in her education, the improvements in her family's life, and the joy she found in small accomplishments. He admired how she continued to live with humility and dedication, never losing sight of the values that had first inspired him. Clara's life, strengthened by support, yet guided by her own choices, became a source of hope and inspiration for Jonathan, back in the town. Clara noticed small changes in her life but could not fully understand how they had come about. Her home was more comfortable, her family's worries eased, and the hotel ran more smoothly with better resources. She felt grateful for these improvements but was unaware of the person who had orchestrated them. The knowledge that someone cared enough to act without seeking recognition touched her deeply, even if she did not know the source. Clara continued to live with the same courage and humility that had defined her actions. Unaware that her heroism had reached far beyond her immediate world, Jonathan made a point of visiting the town occasionally, each time spending moments with Clara in quiet observation and conversation. Their bond had grown without words about wealth or status. It's built on respect, admiration, and a shared understanding of life's deeper values. Jonathan learned from her wisdom, and Clara experienced the subtle ways her courage and integrity had shaped someone else's life. They shared walks through the streets, conversations about the community, and moments of quiet reflection, each reinforcing the lessons of empathy and selflessness.